welcome back.
Yes, welcome.
We're on session 57.
We are.
A lot of sessions.
Where have you been?
Well, I just got back from Costa Rica. I was leading the annual retreat that my dear friend Tanya and I lead in Costa Rica every year.
Did you help enlighten some people?
I like to believe that. It feels like we did.
I'll bet you did.
Thank you.
We have a big session for you today, so let's get started. Quick recap of our session number 56, at least the last part of it. We had started on letter number 92, and KH was telling Sinnett about some enemies of HPB and the Mahatmas and Theosophy that were beginning to get up steam and were trying to make recruits. The first one he talked about was Hari Chand Chintaman. If you didn't watch that session, please go back to session number 56 and watch the last 20 minutes approximately of it so that you will know what we're going to be talking about, because we are going to continue that discussion today. Hari Chand Chintaman was somebody that Olcott had met approximately in 1870 in England. And they contacted him when they were making plans to move to India and got involved in an organization that he was involved in, and it turned out to be a bad situation. So they had to disentangle themselves, and in the process, they found out that this Hari Chand Chintaman was a trickster. He had obtained money from them and also from the person he supposedly represented, the Swami Saraswati, and together they had lost the equivalent of about $58,000 in today's money. They were not too happy about it, and they felt it was their responsibility to notify other people of who they had been dealing with. So they revealed the truth, and the result was that he had to flee India, and he was very angry that they had destroyed his money-making scheme. So that was one very strong enemy that they had made by simply telling the truth. A second one was Dr. Henry Billing, who married his wife for her money, then divorced her after he got access to it, and took up with a mistress, another medium, and then proceeded to tell lies about his wife because he didn't want people to think that he had divorced her just so he could get rid of her and take up with someone else. So they also revealed his malfeasance, and he was not too happy about that. So now they've got two enemies, and we're going to find out about another one very soon here. So let's pick up from there in letter number 92.
When Hari Chand arrived 3 years ago from Bombay, smarting under the exposure and bent upon revenge, CCM, Charles Massey, would neither receive him nor would he listen to his stories, for Dayananda Saraswati, whom he recognized and accepted at that time as his spiritual chief, had sent him word to hold no communication with the thief and traitor.
All right, so the Swami was the good guy still at this point. We'll learn more about him later. But he warned the founders about the fact that this Hari Chand Chintaman had defrauded him. So he had already put them on notice about him.
Then it was that C.C. Massey and Charles Carter Blake, the Jesuit expelled from the Theosophical Society for slandering both Swami Dayananda and Hari Chand in the Pall Mall Gazette, became fast friends.
All right, so now we've got another person, Charles Carter Blake. He was an Englishman, an anthropologist, and a paleontologist, and a comparative anatomist.
comparative anatomist. Wow.
Yeah, he was a very well-respected scientist. He was a founding member of the Anthropological Society of London. He was also a spiritualist and a student of theosophy.
Carter Blake had for over 2 years moved heaven and earth to get readmitted into the society, but HPB had proved an unmovable obstacle against such readmission.
Yeah, he was a member at one point, and then he started telling lies about HPB and about the Mahatmas. And they told the founders that he was to be expelled, and he was. And then he wanted desperately to get back in, and she said no.
Both the ex-fellows made peace, put their heads together, and worked since then in a most charming accord. Wow.
Yeah, charming.
This made secret enemy number 3. Charles Massey's devotion was in their way, so they went to work to break the object of that devotion, HPB, by shaking his, CCM's, confidence in her. Dr. Billing could never hope to achieve success in that direction, for CCM knew him too well, having legally defended Billing's ruined and forsaken wife, succeeded in arousing his suspicions against Mrs. Billing as a medium and against her friend HPB, who had defended and supported her against him.
So Massey had defended in court Dr. Billing's wife. He defended her very ably, and so now all of London knew who Dr. Billing was. Now, they were trying to persuade C.C. Massey to become a confederate of theirs and to turn against HPB, but he knew too much about Hari Chand Chintaman, so that was an obstacle. So instead, they tried to turn Billing against HPB.
Thus was the ground well prepared for sowing in it any kind of doubt. Then came Swami's unexpected attack upon the founders, and that proved the death blow to CCM's friendship. Because Swami had been represented to them by her as a high chela, an initiate, he imagined he had never been one, and that, in her misguided zeal to advance the cause, HPB had deceived them all. After the April row, his and her enemies made an easy prey of him. Look at Light. Compare dates and the various cautious and covert attacks. Behold CCM's hesitation and then his sudden pouncing on her. Can't you read between the lines, friend?
Yeah. It's all right there in print in the Spiritualist magazine. If you just read the articles about it and read between the lines, it's all very clear.
But what about Stainton Moses? That's a name we haven't heard in a while.
Yes, he comes up again.
I wonder why.
He's still a friend of Theosophy, even though he's kind of standoffish about it.
Mm-hmm. He, at least, is never the man to utter a deliberate falsehood, much less repeat a slanderous report. He, at least, as well as CCM, is every inch a gentleman and an honest man.
So both of these men are upstanding people and basically honest, but they have some problems.
Well, what about it? Did you forget his profound, sincere irritation with us and HPB as a spiritualist? The chosen vessel of election of Imperator? CCM is ignorant of the laws and mysteries of mediumship, and he is Moses' staunch friend. Read Light again, and see how plainly his irritation grows and becomes louder in his notes. He has entirely misconceived your meaning, or rather quotations from a letter of mine to yourself, who, in your turn, have never correctly understood the situation.
Yeah, remember, this is letter 18, a year ago, more than a year ago. And Stainton Moses never did understand the information that KH had given to Sinnott about his experience with the dweller on the threshold.
What I then said, I now repeat. There is an abyss between the highest and lowest degrees of planetaries. This is in response to your query, is Imperator a planetary spirit? And then my assertion that, quote, Imperator is a brother.
Now, remember, Imperator was the chief spirit guide of Stainton Moses, who was a trance medium.
Moses was the trance medium.
Stainton Moses, yes, was a trance medium. And Imperator, when Stainton Moses was in trance, would speak and communicate through his body. But we found out that Imperator, at different times, was animated by different beings. And Stainton Moses absolutely could not figure that out and didn't care to figure it out. At some points, he was animated by a high member of the spiritual hierarchy, and he didn't want to accept that. As far as he was concerned, there was only one personality that operated through Imperator, and that was it.
This is actually kind of confusing because normally when we talk about being animated by another being, we refer to a physical body being animated, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
Stainton Moses is a physical man who's in a trance, and his spiritual teacher on the astral plane, someone who's being called Imperator, not a physical person, we don't think, just an astral entity, that is being animated by different other beings. So it's kind of confusing. And then Stainton Moses, his mouth is speaking from Imperator, but Imperator is being animated. So it's like a game of telephone almost, kind of. It's being stepped down several times.
And that isn't uncommon, that the same spirit guide will be animated by different personalities behind the scenes. And we will find another example very shortly.
One thing that I don't know if I ever got clear, though, is we never knew who Imperator actually was, though.
No, I thought it might have been a Dian Chohan, but I don't think it was anything quite that high.
So it was someone...
The spiritual hierarchy.
It wasn't one of these other rogue brotherhoods.
Well, at times it was.
But how could the hierarchy allow someone else to come in?
Because they decided to use that same entity in order to communicate with Stainton Moses, and he could not figure out the difference.
So Imperator wasn't a member. Imperator was being used.
No, not at all.
Okay, that's what I was confused about. So Imperator, the being on the astral plane, was not a member of the hierarchy. I wonder how the hierarchy forced their way in then.
These spirit guides exist on the astral plane. They're elementals, and they will accept anyone's direction.
So the spirit guide Imperator itself was never an independent conscious entity communicating through Stainton Moses. It was being used
by various entities behind the scene.
Most of them from the actual spiritual hierarchy that we trust, and sometimes...
Well, only one at different times.
Okay.
It was more than once.
Okay.
But most of the time it was someone else.
From a different lineage that we
Right.
don't really trust, per se. We don't know
Right.
about.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right, this is KH continuing. I guess he's still repeating what was said in previous letters.
Right.
But what is a brother in reality? Do you know? For what HPB has added out of the depths of her own consciousness, perhaps, I do not hold myself responsible. For she knows nothing for certain about Imperator, and often, dreaming dreams, she draws her own original conclusions from them. Result: Moses regards us as impostors and liars, or just fiction, in which case the compliment returns to HPB.
So here's another potential enemy. We've got 3 dedicated ones. 2 of them are working on C.C. Massey to try to make him into an enemy of Theosophy. And here's another one who is very weak and could possibly be turned against them.
Now, what are the facts and what are the accusations against HPB? There are many shadowy points against her in CCM's mind, and with every day they become blacker and uglier. I will give you an instance. While in London at the Billings home in January 1879, HPB, who had produced a china pot from under the table, was asked by CCM to give him some phenomenally produced object too. Consenting, she caused a small card case as carved in Bombay to appear in the pocket of his overcoat hung in the hall. Inside it was found a slip of paper with a facsimile of Harichand Chintaman's signature on it.
So she produced two phenomena that day. The first was a teapot, and guess what? It's actually at Adyar today. And we'll display a photo of it on the screen. The card case, of course, we don't have because that was taken when the person left.
At the time, no suspicion entered his mind since there really was no ground for any. But now you see, he believes it was either a trick or a half-deception at least. Why? Because at that time, he believed H.C. was a Chela, that's Harichand Chintaman, was a Chela, all but a great adept, as allowed and led to suppose by HPB. And now he knows that H.C. was never a Chela, that he never had any powers, denies any knowledge of or belief in such, and tells everyone that even Dayananda has never been a yogi, but is simply, quote, an ambitious imposter like Muhammad. Like the Prophet Muhammad?
Right.
Oh, wow.
These people can't figure out that people do sometimes change. They go from being good to being nefarious. And this was the situation with not only Harichand Chintaman, who was probably always nefarious, but also the Swami as well. He was at one time apparently a Chela of some Mahatma, but he failed.
In short, so many lies brought and left at the founder's door. And then her letters and the reports by trustworthy witnesses of her confederacy with Mrs. Billing. Hence, confederacy between her and Eglinton.
Now, remember, Eglinton was the one that they had tried to convince when he was on his way back to England and had an amazing experience with KH on board the ship. But then when he got back, the spiritualists convinced him that that would end his career if he denounced spiritualism and took up theosophy, and he decided the money was more important.
She is proved in their minds, at any rate, an arch plotter, a deceiver, a crafty character, and if not that, a visionary lunatic, an obsessed medium. European Western logic. Letters? Very easy to alter words, hence the whole meaning of a sentence in letters. The Swami also has letters from her, which he freely translates, quotes from, and comments upon in response to the July supplement.
Now, in the July supplement of the Theosophist, they had apparently posted or written an article about the Swami and about his fall from grace. And he didn't like that, so he wrote a response and they published it.
Now pray, oblige me by carefully reading over again the defense. Note the barefaced lies of India's great reformer.
And that's Swami because his pretended objective was to reform Hinduism, to restore it to its original purity. And that's why the founders were so enthralled with his mission. It said, you know what? We can get behind that. We can merge our two organizations and become a powerful force. But when they arrived in India, they found that that wasn't the case. And they then had to disentangle themselves from their association with him.
We're talking about this Dayananda Saraswati.
Yes.
Remember what was admitted to you and then denied. And if my word of honor has any weight with you, then know that Dayananda Swami was an initiated yogi, a very high Chela at Badranath, endowed some years back with great powers and a knowledge he has since forfeited. Wow. And that HPB told you only the truth, as well as that HC, that's Harichand Chintaman, was a Chela of his who preferred to follow the left-hand path.
So everything HPB has said is true, but they're saying, why would she not have known all of this ahead of time? Well, because they changed who they were. They were, yes, both a high Chela with powers on the right path, and Harichand Chintaman was also a Chela on the right path. Both of them failed.
Just to put this in a little bit of context, since we have so much content every session, this letter is from KH to Sinnett in 1882. That's 7 years after the TS was formed. The TS was formed in 1875, so it's been around for 7 years, and they're already gaining so many of these critics and flat-out enemies, really, because they would rather believe in the flowery messages they're getting from their seances, basically, right? Trying to poke holes in theosophy. 7 years. It's only 7 years in, and we're already kind of coming towards the latter part of the Mahatma Letters series.
And they knew from the beginning, because as we learned in our last session, the Mahatmas will not lie. If they know something, they will tell you they know it. If they don't know something, they will tell you they don't know it. Mm-hmm. They know that spiritualism was full of frauds, and it was one of their objectives to clean it up. We'll learn a little bit more about that in just a few minutes, but they tell the truth as it is, and they knew full well that most people would not like that at all.
And please also remember, and I know we repeat this a lot, but this whole thing, this entire process we're studying was an experiment.
Yes.
And the TS still is in existence, obviously. Even though the masters are nowhere near as involved as they were back in this 20-ish year period that we're talking about, maybe, it's still kind of an experiment, but we'll see how this is kind of falling apart in a sense. It's kind of like going downhill.
The original authorization for this experiment was 7 years.
Okay, right.
So,
yeah, that's true.
So this is October of 1882. 1 month later is going to be the 7-year anniversary. And everyone is on notice that it will be reevaluated by the Mahachohan at that point, and everything could come to an end at that point.
So I just said 20 years. It absolutely was not 20 years. It was this 7-year period, but the letters do go past that a little bit.
Right. So obviously that was extended, but we'll find out under what circumstances it was extended.
I just wanted to bring some context in here as to what this is all about, really. And now, see what has become of his truly great man whom we all knew and placed our hopes in.
And that's the Swami.
Okay. There he is, a moral wreck, ruined by his ambition and panting for breath in his last struggle for supremacy, which he knows we will not leave in his hands.
Right. But they're going to tell the truth.
And now, if this man, 10 times greater morally and intellectually than Harichand, could fall so low and resort to such a mean course, what is his ex-friend and pupil Harichand not capable of to satisfy his thirst for revenge? The former has at least an excuse, his ferocious ambition that he mistakes for patriotism.
That's the Swami.
His once alter ego, Harichand Chintamani, has no excuse except his desire to harm those who exposed him. And to achieve such results, he is prepared to do anything. But you will perhaps inquire, why have we not interfered? Why we, the natural protectors of the founders meaning
of
HPB and Alcott, okay.
Right.
If not of the society, have to put a stop to the shameful conspiracies.
Yeah, good question. Why didn't they
Interfere, right. A pertinent question, but I doubt whether my answer, with all its sincerity, will be clearly understood. You are thoroughly unacquainted with our system, and if I could succeed in making it clear to you, 10 to 1, your better feelings, the feelings of a European, would be ruffled, if not worse, with such a shocking discipline. The fact is, until the last and supreme initiation, now this is on the path of everyone's spiritual growth, the last and supreme initiation, I guess before transcendence.
No, he's talking about before becoming a Mahatma, an adept.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Every Chela who's a student, and even some adepts.
Well, no, remember that you can become an adept and not yet be a full adept, because that's the case for KH right now. He has said several times he is not yet a full adept.
Yeah.
And I assume by that,
right,
that's a type of Chohan, because a Chohan is an adept, but it's a higher grade of adept.
But he uses last and supreme initiation. That sounds like it's way far
Maybe.
above.
Well, maybe. It's hard to say.
But no, I think you're right, though. It's just his language, again, is just not our language. But
yeah. We'll see. Some of these initiations are so excruciating that could definitely be called a supreme initiation.
But what this is referring to is before you become a full-blown master, this is what we're talking about.
They are the main workers on the earth of trying to help humanity.
Of which Moria is one, not KH yet. Moria and whoever else, we don't have their names.
No, but I'm pretty sure that KH became a full master not long after this.
The fact is, until the last and supreme initiation, every Chela and even some adepts is left to his own device and counsel. Of course they are, because it's a test. You got to be able to do it yourself. We have to fight our own battles, and the familiar adage, the adept becomes, he is not made, is true to the letter. I've actually never heard that before. The adept becomes, he is not made.
He has said that in similar words, that it's not that someone can teach you something and then as you grow in knowledge, you become an adept.
Someone doesn't form you into it. You have to become it yourself.
Yeah. It's not like going through the steps of becoming a pope in some other church where...
Like, here's the recipe, check these boxes and you'll be it. That doesn't work that way.
No. You have to go through an excruciating self-transformation yourself. All they can do is give you some hints, but you have to make that transformation on your own.
A lot of it is self-directed. I mean, of course, some of these tests will be put in front of you, not knowing per se that they are tests, but a lot of it is choices that aren't really apparent. Like, should I go this way in life or this way? And depending on your choice, that's the test, or you can avoid the test and defer. That's kind of how it works. You're not going to really know. It's self-directed.
So what happens is that throughout this process, you become a completely, totally different person from what you were even a couple of years previous. And if you examine that individual at various times, you're like, how did they get like that? And they have changed drastically. They're not at all the same person they were before.
Since every one of us is the creator and producer of the causes that lead to one result or another, wink, wink, karma, we have to reap only what we have sown, karma. I'm adding that myself. Our chelas are helped only when they are innocent of the causes that lead them into trouble, which does happen sometimes. When such causes are generated by foreign outside influences, so that does happen. If other people are interfering, he's saying then they might step in to offer some assistance. But if it's anything at all that we cause from karma, they're not going to interfere with that. Life and the struggle for adeptship would be too easy. Boom. If we all had cleaners behind us to sweep away.
He used the word scavengers, but that's something they used in India for people who clean up the streets and everything.
Again, if Terry wouldn't have done that, this would have been less meaningful. Cleaners, that makes more sense. If we all had cleaners behind us to sweep away the effects we have generated through our own rashness and assumptions, as opposed, the side note from Paul, as opposed to reaping the effects of it in the form of a challenge to overcome, which is how you do clear your karma, not by someone sweeping it up for you.
And your changes that you make in yourself are the result of these terrible trials that you go through. And having succeeded,
that's the process.
You don't even know of what you are capable until you are tested.
Before they are allowed to go out into the world, they, the chelas, are every one of them endowed to some extent with clairvoyant powers. Now, when he says endowed, does that mean given?
They're taught how to do that, yes.
Okay. Endowed to some extent with clairvoyant powers, and with the exception of that faculty that, unless paralyzed and watched, would lead them perchance to divulge certain secrets that must not be revealed. They are left in the full exercise of their powers, whatever these may be.
So, example, HPB. She's one of the advanced chelas that was allowed to go back out into the world in order to spread the philosophy But she had that power restricted to some extent so that she wouldn't inadvertently reveal any of the secrets. And that's one of the reasons why she has a quirky personality. But that's not the only reason.
At the same time, she retained enough autonomy to produce a teapot if necessary, if she deemed it appropriate. But that's why you don't see Mahatmas walking on water when someone says, show me something cool. Prove it. Prove you're a magic man. That's why they're not doing that, because they have the ego in check enough to know that it's not going to be helpful. But some teachers can do things from time to time if they deem it appropriate for the context.
And remember, at the beginning of Jesus' ministry on earth, what did he do?
He walked on some water.
Miracle. He showed people of what he was capable. And some of those have probably been enhanced by his biographers, but obviously he had cities, he had powers.
And what happened to Jesus? Most of the world thought he was a fraud and a fake and a false prophet. I mentioned this in at least one of our other videos, but on Netflix, if you're curious, watch Messiah. It's a dramatized, of course, perspective of a modern day prophet who shows up in the Middle East and is a Jesus-like figure, and it shows very interesting insights into the groups of people who are witnessing this. The Americans, who's this person who's gaining a following in the Middle East, and then different groups in the Middle East, some are following him, their perspectives on who this guy is or isn't. It's called Messiah. It's just one season. I wish they'd make a second season, but is he a prophet or not? That's the question. Watch. It's interesting.
There's another interesting experiment, a guy who called himself Kumara.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. That's a really good one.
So this is someone who decided in advance that he was going to do this experiment of creating an organization presenting himself as this highly enlightened individual that he called Kumara. And he attracted a large group of people who were just completely devoted. And then, as part of the experiment, at one point, he revealed that it was all fake. And what happened?
They didn't believe him that it was fake.
Yeah. That would have destroyed their illusion, and they would not admit that he was actually a fake, even though he told them he was.
This process happens more times than I want to even believe. Every cult, this is the same thing. It is curious. I know we're going off track, but it is curious that after Jesus was crucified and after most of the world didn't believe him, how did Christianity get so big?
Because it brought down the teachings. Remember, the most accurate teachings are most likely those presented by the Gnostics, and they were very small. They were a small group of the Christians. Most of the Christians were all about emotional fanaticism. And that's the part that survived and that actually stamped out Gnosticism, which was the more accurate version of it.
The emperors themselves, the very people who crucified him, converted to Christianity.
Because they realized the value in it.
They can control the people.
Right. They had control from their position in the government, but they didn't have emotional control over them. The church had that.
Wow. Think about that. The very people who crucified him, oh, sorry, we shouldn't have done that. We're going to believe you now.
They just ignore any reasons and just say, yeah, I'm converted. I'm now a believer in your cause.
It was a few hundred years, right? Before
it was about 300 AD.
Before the Roman Empire officially became Christian. Why don't they exercise them? Meaning, why don't the chelas with these clairvoyant powers exercise them? Thus, step by step and after a series of punishment, the chela is taught by bitter experience to suppress and guide his impulses.
And it isn't the Mahatmas that punish them, it's their own karma. They are punished by letting them deal with the consequences of what they do and the mistakes they make.
He loses his rashness, his self-sufficiency, and never falls into the same errors.
Exactly. If you don't let people fail experiencing the results of their action, that's why trying to bail out your children when they make mistakes is the biggest mistake you can make. Let them deal with the consequences. If they spend a few nights in jail, it might be very good for them.
All that now happens is brought on by HPB herself, and to you, my friend and brother, I will reveal her shortcomings. For you were tested and tried, and you alone have not hitherto failed, at any rate, not in one direction, that of discretion and silence.
So far, Sinnett has not failed like Hume did. And one of those reasons is because he has kept silent. Even though he's had a lot of misgivings about HPB especially, he hasn't advertised those. He hasn't tried to tell people, oh, she's a fraud.
Because his ego is much more in check than the other guy, Hume. Hume is the opposite, very vocal.
He's got numerous problems, but his ego is number one.
Out of Hume and Sinnett, which one is more clairvoyant?
Neither one, really.
But before I reveal her one great fault to you, a fault indeed in its disastrous results, yet all things considered a virtue, I must remind you of that which you so heartily hate, namely, that no one comes in contact with us. No one shows a desire to know more of us, but has to submit to being tested and put on probation by us. Thus Massey could no more than any other escape his fate. He has been tempted and allowed to be deceived by appearances, and to fall but too easily a prey to his weakness, suspicion, and lack of self-confidence.
Now remember, CCM is one of the 4 people put on probation in January of this same year, so 10 months earlier. Hume, Massey, Sinnett, and Fern were put on probation, and I think most of them didn't realize they were on probation.
Do we know, I'm sure it varies for everybody, but how long would a probation period last? Years, right? A few years?
Usually at least 7, and sometimes much longer.
It's a trial period to prove themselves worthy for actual chelaship.
Right.
I guess it could stand to reason that some people would have a shorter than 7.
Yes, that is true.
In short, he is found lacking in the first element of success in a candidate, unshaken faith. That's a funny word, though.
Well, if you don't have faith in the Mahatma who is trying to train you in order to become a chela, what's the use of progressing?
And we might venture to use a different word because in our book we say something about faith that's pretty direct. We kind of joke around by saying it's believing in something you know ain't true.
That's the common. We have a different version of faith. And yes, you do need faith, because when you learn a new system, there's no reason that you have to believe in it. But if it makes sense, try it.
Yes.
Put it on probation.
Yeah, exactly. And use your own intuition. Allow your Buddhic nature, the Buddha nature inside of you, tell you if this could be right. We have a very good internal compass. Most of us don't know how to even listen to it or see it or read it. But your internal insights, your sensitivity, will tell you if something is probably real or not.
If you listen to it.
Meditate more and you'll see this compass guiding you.
And this is discernment.
Yes, exactly.
If you don't have discernment, if you haven't practiced it and developed it, you're going to be lost.
So that's the first element of success in a candidate, unshaken faith. Once his conviction rests upon and has taken root in knowledge, not simply belief in certain facts. CCM knows that certain phenomena of hers, HPBs, are undeniably genuine. His position with regard to that being precisely the position of yourself and your lady, his wife, I assume, in reference to the yellow ring stone.
And do you remember that?
No.
HPB had been given a yellow diamond, which was made into a ring that she wore. Mrs. Sinnett admired it so much that HPB duplicated not the ring, but the diamond. The diamond that she created for Mrs. Sinnett wasn't quite as good of quality, but Mrs. Sinnett didn't care, and we assumed she made it into a ring and wore it. But apparently, Sinnett at some point became a little suspicious of that. But he never used that against her. He just was like, there's something a little strange. But he only said that to himself.
Thinking you had reasons to believe the stone in question was simply brought like the doll, not doubled as she asserted, and disliking in the depths of your soul such a useless deception, As you have always thought, on her part, you have not repudiated her for all that, nor exposed or complained of her in the papers as he has.
Yeah, so he did have suspicions, but he didn't share it with people.
In short, even when refusing her the benefit of the doubt in your own hearts, you have not doubted the phenomenon, but only her accuracy in explaining it. And while being utterly wrong, you were undeniably right in acting with such a discretion in the matter. Not so in his case. After entertaining during the period of 3 years a blind faith in her amounting almost to a feeling of veneration, at the first breath of successful calumny, he, a staunch friend and an excellent lawyer, falls victim to a wicked plot, and his regard for her is changed into positive contempt and a conviction of her guilt.
Yeah, he's an attorney. He's supposed to know what the truth is, but he's not very good at determining it, apparently.
Instead of acting as you would have acted in such a case, namely either never mentioning the fact to her or asking her for an explanation, giving the accused the opportunity of defending herself and thus acting consistently with his honest nature, he preferred giving vent to his feelings in public print and to satisfy his rancor against her and us by adopting an indirect means of attacking her statements in Isis. By the by, and begging your pardon for this digression, he does not, it seems, regard her answer in the Theosophist to be candid.
Yeah, I don't know what that answer was, but she tried to convince him otherwise, and he thought that wasn't a very honest answer.
Funny logic when coming from such an acute logician. Had he proclaimed in all the papers and at the top of his voice that the author or authors of Isis Unveiled have not been candid while writing the book, that they often and purposely mislead the reader by withholding the necessary explanations and have given only portions of the truth, had he even declared, as Mr. Hume does, that the work teems with practical errors and deliberate misstatements, he would have been gloriously acquitted because he would have been right from a European standpoint and heartily excused by us. But to call a correct and truthful explanation not candid is something I can hardly comprehend, though I am quite aware that his view is shared even by yourself. Alas, my friends, I am very much afraid that our respective standards of right and wrong will never agree together, since motive is everything for us, and you will never go beyond appearances. However, to return to the main question.
Yeah, what is the main question?
Thus, CCM knows he is too intelligent, too acute an observer of human nature to have remained ignorant of that most important of facts, namely that the woman has no possible motive for deception. There is a sentence in his letter which, framed in a little kinder spirit, would go far to show how well he could appreciate and recognize the real motives. If his mind hadn't been poisoned by prejudice, due, perhaps, more to St. Moses' irritation than to the efforts of her 3 above enumerated enemies. He remarks in passing that the system of deception may be due to her zeal, but regards it as a dishonest zeal.
A dishonest zeal. All of this explanation shows to us that K.H. is much more logical than any of these other people. He looks at a situation, analyzes it very carefully, all of the pieces, and then analyzes what is the logical explanation for things. He takes everything into account, and that's what makes him a Mahatma, a master. These other people have their own filters that they add on to everything, trying to make it fit their perception of things. And they have ulterior motives. He has no ulterior motive except getting at the truth. Now, we need to, before we go into this explanation of HPB and her excessive zeal, explain a little bit about why she has this excessive zeal. And to do that, we're going to go back 7 years, more than 7 years previously.
To before the TS was founded.
And this is going to be early in 1875. She went through a period of time that changed everything. Remember, she arrived on very short notice in America in July of 1873. She was living in Paris at the time, I believe at her brother's apartment, and she received a message from her Mahatma, go to America immediately. She immediately booked passage and arrived in America with no idea what she was going to do. She had very little money. She had to figure out a way to cover her expenses, and she did whatever it took, menial jobs, to try to get enough money to survive in New York City, and then awaited more information. It was only more than a year later that she met Olcott at the Eddy residence, the farm in Chittenden, Vermont. And that's when they were both investigating spiritualism. So all this time, she wasn't completely knowledgeable of why she was even there, except she knew that she was supposed to try to clean up the spiritualist movement in America. She knew that there was a lot of fraud that was going on, and yet there was a lot of real phenomena. And she wanted to, on behalf of the Mahatmas, clean it up so that they could use spiritualism as a method of propagating theosophy. And as it turned out, it was an abject failure because the spiritualists were adamant that they were completely right. They were speaking to dead individuals, not to elementals. So during this period, she went through a transformation. And part of this transformation involved a man named Michael Bettinelli. Michael Bettinelli was from Georgia, not the state of Georgia, the country. And HPB had experience living in Georgia, in the capital, which at the time was called Tiflis, and today is called Tbilisi. So she knew about Georgia and the Georgian people. And she, in fact, was aware of his family, this man, Bettinelli. He had arrived in America poor and was trying to make a fortune in America, this land of opportunity. So he was importing and selling carpets from Asia and was hoping to make his fortune that way.
That's what my grandpa on my mom's side did.
That's right, yes.
Oriental rugs.
So they met him when both of them were in Philadelphia to investigate a spiritualist medium there. And this Bettinelli showed up at one of the seances and was immediately smitten with HPB. He began writing to her long letters importuning her that he wanted to marry her and take care of her.
Oh, he was smitten romantically, not just fascinated with what she was doing.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And he actually had some clairvoyant abilities, and that's why he recognized that she was the real deal, that she knew what she was talking about. But he decided that he was going to do everything possible to further this cause that she was so devoted to, of cleaning up spiritualism. But he said, I want to marry you, I will provide for you. And she rebuffed him again and again, but he never gave up. And finally, as Olcott said, in kind of a fit of pique, she accepted his proposal and said, okay, I will marry you, only because you are so devoted to the cause, but on the condition that we will have no conjugal relationships. I will live in your house, but as a separate individual, I will keep my name, and there will be no marriage-type relationship. He said, okay, I can go along with that.
Wow.
So she moved to Philadelphia. Now, in January of 1875, she had fallen more than once, apparently, and injured her leg so badly that it had become gangrenous.
Oh, no.
There was so much damage to her leg that the doctors kept telling her that leg has got to be amputated or you're going to die.
Oh, God.
And she was adamant that she was not going to let that happen. So now we're going to pick up the story there, and we're going to learn about cold water poultices and a white pup.
This is back to 1875 still, or did
This
the
is
courting process take a while?
Well, it was a period of months. Well, actually, it wasn't even that long, because it was near the beginning of 1875. And remember, Alcott only met her in October of 1874. So they barely knew each other at all. And he kept up with her once they got back to New York City. They communicated very often. And he talks about her receiving all these letters from Bettinelli begging her to marry him. And for whatever reason, she conceded. So she's now living in Philadelphia, and we're going to pick up here the story.
So this is from personal memoirs?
Yes, this is from a book written by Mary K. Neff, and she was very devoted to HPB's memory and to her life. In fact, the book written by Sylvia Cranston was very much based on this book by Mary K. Neff, who did a tremendous amount of research. And she based it on a lot of the letters that HPB had written to her family members back in Russia, to other Russians, and her letters to Sinnott, because Sinnott published a book after his death called The Letters of H.P. Blavatsky to A.P. Sinnott, or rather, I should say, his executor published that book. So this first thing we're going to read is a letter that HPB wrote to General Lippitt. General Lippitt was one of their helpers in trying to redeem spiritualism and to clean it up. So they were trying to find helpers anywhere they could who would donate money and work for the cause of cleaning up spiritualism.
So this is the first time we're hearing about this General Lippitt, but we're going back in time quite a bit also.
Yes. So there were several people. A Professor Corson was another one who helped them. And there were quite a few people, but they were up against quite a formidable object here of the old form of spiritualism. So she's writing to this General Lippitt who lives in Boston.
So this is HPB speaking here,
Right.
or writing here.
Writing.
I am sadly afraid I will not be able to go to Washington with you. My leg is worse than ever. John, this is Bettinelli?
No, this is John King, a spirit guide. Go ahead and read that, and then we'll explain John King.
John had completely cured it and ordered me to rest for 3 days. I neglected it, and from that day, I feel it getting worse and worse.
Yeah, John King, a spirit guide that first appeared in London around 1850. Various mediums had contacted this spirit guide, who sometimes, just like Imperator, had different personalities behind him,
So John
animated.
is not a physical person.
No. In fact, he is quite a trickster and plays mean tricks
Why is
sometimes.
HPB talking to him?
Well, because sometimes her own Mahatma would use him as a means to communicate with her. And she was very devoted to this John King because he was perfectly willing to do that.
That's so weird. I wonder why Moria Arcade doesn't just talk to her astrally.
We're going to find out. Much of her training came from, believe it or not, Mahatmas that lived in Egypt. And in fact, they communicated quite often with Alcott during this period of time, once she got to America. And some of their letters are really interesting and strange because they speak in an old type of English from King James period, what is called the Jacobean period of England. So you'll see it's similar to the King James Bible way of speaking. So that's who this John King is, and he's quite a character. On May 21st, HPB wrote to Alcott now.
The paralysis has set in. I had the surgeon Pancoast and Mrs. Mitchener, the clairvoyant. The former says it's too late. The latter promises recovery if I do as she tells me. I'm too tired to write more.
So she was having serious problems with this leg, and we're going to find out she has more problems than that. And then on June 12th, this is 1875, and remember the Theosophical Society was formed just a few months later. She wrote again to General Lippitt.
I have in many things cat-like propensities, and one of them is to be ever on the lookout and try to die alone if I can do it.
She really was afraid that she was about to die. In fact, Bettinelli was such a nervous Nellie that she sent him away. He went somewhere out west, which could have meant Ohio in those days. And he was gone for this period of time because she didn't need his energy around.
So I told him to be ready to come back when I write him that I am better, or when somebody else writes him that I am gone home, or kick the bucket, as John King very kindly learnt me to say. Oh my gosh. Well, I did not quite die yet, for again, like the cats, I have 9 lives in me, it appears. And because I am not wanted yet in the bosom of Abraham, I suppose.
Remember the old Negro spiritual, "Oh, rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham."
But as I am still in bed very weak, cross, and generally feel mad from 12 a.m. to 12 p.m., so I keep the chap away yet for his own benefit and my comfort. My leg was going to be chopped off clean, but I said, mortification or sugar plums, I won't have it. She's so funny. Mortification or sugar plums, I won't have it. Fancy my father's daughter on a wooden leg. Fancy my leg going to the spirit land before me. She's funny.
Yeah, she is funny. Even in all her problems and travails, she keeps her sense of humor.
George Washington Childs would have a nice chance to compose pretty obituary with the usual refrain, gone to meet her leg.
He was a spiritualist who loved to write obituaries, apparently, about so-and-so has gone to meet deceased relatives. She was going to go to meet her leg.
Indeed, so I summoned my best willpower, my Sunday one. Oh my gosh, that's funny. And begged of the doctors and surgeons to go and look for my leg on the Centennial grounds.
Now, the Centennial grounds, this is 1875, and the 100-year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which was signed where? In Philadelphia. So she was in Philadelphia at the time, and all the talk was about this grand celebration. They had a whole huge celebration for the centennial. They bought property, they were building pavilions. It was going to be basically a World's Fair. As it turned out, there was an economic downturn and it was a bit of a bust.
Oh no.
But there was lots of construction going on at the time, so I think that's why she said, go and look for my leg on the Centennial grounds with all this construction going on.
In the letters of the Master Serapis to Colonel Alcott. Now, Serapis sounds like one of the Egyptian
Yes,
masters.
he is. Serapis Bey. He wrote quite often to Alcott, and we'll see his style of writing.
We have letters from him.
Yes, we do.
Wow.
And in fact, I'll try to find a copy and put it on the screen. They're quite interesting. One was written on heavy green paper in gold ink. We don't have any color photographs, but even just seeing them in black and white is quite interesting.
In the letters of the Master Serapis to Colonel Alcott will be found quite another motive for HPB's marriage to Mr. Bettinelli, whom Jinnarajadasa describes as a peasant. I don't think we've heard his name. Have we heard of Jinnarajadasa?
Jinnarajadasa became president of the Theosophical Society after Arundel, I guess, and he actually died in America in 1954, I think it was. But he compiled, before he became president, during Annie Besant's period of presidency, 2 books, the Letters from the Masters of Wisdom, and this is included in that.
So Mr. Bettinelli, whom Jinnarajadasa describes as a peasant, a man who had built up a small business as an importer and exporter, this motive was an intense desire to forward the master's cause, the master Serapis Bey.
Well, masters plural, so it's not only the Tibetan masters, but also the Egyptian masters.
To forward the master's cause in America, having no funds and being assured by young Mr. Bettinelli that he would devote himself and his all to the work of aiding spiritualism, the then phase of the cause, HPB took him at his word.
This is the description by Jinnarajadasa.
HPB took him at his word and sacrificed her inclinations and sensibilities to the need of the hour. Master Serapis, in a communication written sometime after March 9th, she suffers intensely. Our sister has just mailed to her brother Henry the sum of $500. Who's Henry?
Henry Olcott.
Oh.
He calls him our brother Henry.
Okay. Our sister has just mailed to her brother Henry the sum of $500, her donation in case of death.
Yeah, she really believed that she was about to die. And she mailed $500 to Olcott and said, if I die, please give this to the cause of trying to save spiritualism from these dishonest mediums.
The possible emergency of such a case is no idle talk of our noble sister. The dweller is watching closely and will never lose an opportunity if our sister's courage fails.
Aha, the dweller. She was going through something very similar to what St. Moses went through just a year later. And she knew of what she spoke because she had just recently been through the same situation.
This is to be one of her hardest trials. An Elorian, eternal and immortal, is her Ogoides. Our brother's mission cannot be completed or accomplished during his first stay in the Boston city. Let him plan the ground and prepare it for the reception of our sister, if she survives the trial. For on goodwill to her and on the intensity of magnetic thought concentrated on our sister, much of her safety will depend on the perilous descent to the...
And there is a word that is indecipherable, but it's probably something similar to the underground. She's being tried very roughly by the dweller on the threshold. And this is so intense that they're not certain that she will survive. Remember that when St. Moses was going through the same thing later, she begged Moria, please stop. And he said he has to be tested because they knew that he had accepted the challenge of making himself worthy to be one of their chelas. But he failed. Fortunately, he didn't die, but it is possible.
This is to be one of her hardest trials. Thou knowest not yet, O brother mine, of all the mysteries and powers of thought, yea, of human thought. How dangerous for her will the achievement of her duty, and how likely to expect for both of you to lose a sister and a providence on earth.
Meaning a godlike individual.
Serapis.
I can only imagine which initiation this might have been. We'll find out later that the Mahatmas say she is unfit to be an adept, but they meant in this lifetime. So this is the initiation that I'm pretty sure DK has already passed successfully at some point. Who knows when? And it may have been several years previous to that. But now it's HPB's turn to go through a very high initiation, and sometimes some chelas can pass this initiation in one lifetime and still become an adept in the same lifetime. That's not going to be the case for her, but it's a major, major step towards becoming an adept.
In May, the master wrote to Colonel Olcott, she must encounter once more, and face to face the dreaded one. She thought she would behold no more.
She thought she was over it.
Yeah. Well, when did she have a dweller on the threshold moment before?
Well, this is an ongoing thing. It lasted for weeks.
She must either conquer or die herself his victim.
Now, she went through periods of time when she was basically in a catatonic state for hours and hours. So this was a very rough trial period.
We read about one of those states back in the normal timeline of things.
And that happened 2 years later. She's been through many trials in her lifetime.
How solitary, unprotected, but still dauntless. We've heard that word before. She will have to face all the great perils and unknown mysterious dangers she must encounter. Brother mine, I can do naught for our poor sister. She has placed herself under the stern law of the lodge, and these laws can be softened for no one. As an Elorian, she must win her right. We didn't define that.
Ellora is a location in India about 200 miles from Bombay. And apparently there is a group of Mahatmas that are based out of there. And in fact, it seems that some of the Mahatmas in Egypt are connected with that group of Mahatmas rather than the one in Tibet. Even though they all work together, they have their affiliations, and they are affiliated with the group in southern India.
She must win her right. The final result of the dreaded ordeal depends on her and her alone, and on the amount of sympathy for her from her two brothers, Henry and Elbridge.
Now, Elbridge was Elbridge Jerry Brown, who was...
Like John King?
No, he was a real human person. He had established a spiritualist magazine, which, along with them, tried to weed out all of the bad actors in spiritualism. And he was desperately trying to keep his magazine alive because he didn't have much money. So HPB did everything she could to raise money for him, soliciting donations from other people who could afford it. And they tried everything they could to help this Jerry Brown accomplish his goal.
Her two brothers, Henry and Elbridge, on the strength and power of their will, sent out by both to her wherever she may be. Know, O brother, that such willpower, strengthened by sincere affection, will surround her with an impenetrable shield, a strong protecting shield formed of the combined pure good wishes of two immortal souls, and powerful in proportion to the intensity of their desires to see her triumphant. If she returns triumphant and alive, pray, both of you, for our sister. She deserves it. Serapis.
So she will be triumphant if she remains alive.
She feels unhappy, and in her bitter hours of mental agony and sorrow, looks to thee for friendly advice and soothing words of comfort. Devoted to the great cause of truth, she sacrificed to it her very heart's blood, believing that she might help it if she took a husband whose love for her would open his hand and make him give freely. She hesitated not, but tied herself to him she hated.
She didn't really care for him, but she was convinced that this was a means of helping the Mahatmas achieve their goal.
Her cup of bitterness is full, O brother. Be friendly and merciful to her, brother, and leaving otherwise the weak and silly wretch whom fate has given her for husband to his desert. Pity him.
So instead of being upset with him, pity him.
Also him who, by giving himself up entirely to the power of the dweller, has merited his fate. His love for her is gone. The sacred flame has died for want of fuel. He heeded not her warning voice. He hates John and worships the dweller who holds with him communication.
So he is able to communicate with whoever this entity is the dweller on the threshold. And remember, quite often they are Dugpas who are used by the Mahatmas to test their chelas.
Finding himself on the brink of bankruptcy, his secret design is to sail for Europe and leave her unprovided and alone. Really?
Yes.
Unless we help him for the sake of her, our sister, her life is doomed, and for her, her future will be poverty and sickness. Oh my God. The laws which govern our lodge will not allow us to interfere in her fate by means that might seem supernal.
Which is supernatural.
Okay. She can get no money, but through him she wedded. Her pride must be humbled even before him she hates. Serapis has a very different way of speaking.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying he speaks Jacobean English.
Very biblical. You're right. Still, there are means left at our disposal to provide for her, and through her benefit yourself and the cause.
The Mahatmas are very restricted in how they use money. They do have money available to them, but as we've seen, they are very careful about how much and to whom they give it and under what circumstances. On June 25th, Colonel Olcott received another letter from Serapis.
People must respect her purity and virtue, for she deserves it. Brother Henry, he uses the word brother a lot too, which makes it sound extra flowery.
Yeah, his way of speaking is very elevated. Yeah, it's very flowery.
For some reason, the feeling is almost less genuine a little bit. You know how we always compare and contrast the Mahatma letters to other letters, other communications that sound, love, my brother, is the answer, that kind of thing. That's how it sounds.
Yes, but who knows where he learned his English from?
Sure. People must respect her purity and virtue, for she deserves it. Brother Henry must have the wisdom of the serpent and gentleness of a lamb. For he who hopes to solve in time the great problems of the macrocosmal world and conquer face to face the dweller, taking thus by violence the threshold on which lie buried nature's most mysterious secrets, must try first the energy of his willpower, the indomitable resolution to succeed, and bringing out to light all the hidden mental faculties of his Atma and highest intelligence, get at the problems of man's nature and solve first the mysteries of his heart. Wow. Cool. Write to our suffering sister daily, comfort her aching heart, and forgive the childish shortcomings of one whose true and faithful heart takes no share with the defects of an early spoilt childhood. In July 1875, he received the following. He meaning?
Olcott.
Okay. Our sister's present is dark, but her future may be bright yet. All depends on yourself and herself. Let your Atma work out your intuitions. You must not part with Elena if you desire your initiation. But through her, you may be enabled to conquer the trials of initiation. They are hard, and you may despair more than once, but do not, I pray thee, remember some men have toiled for years for the knowledge you have obtained in a few months.
Yes,
Wow.
Exactly.
Try to help the poor broken-hearted woman, and success will crown your noble efforts. Try to help her find the money needed. For the 3rd of next month, her money is certain to return into her hands.
This is very important because previous to this, HPB's father had died in Russia, and she didn't find out until weeks later. She kept writing letters and no one was answering. And then she found out that her father had died, and she was left an inheritance. It was quite a bit of money, not a fortune, but she had invested most of it in an enterprise by buying property with a French woman that was a farm in upstate New York. And she was hoping to make money off of this. Well, it turned out to be a bad investment. She ended up suing the woman. She was to get back, I think, $5,000, which would be the equivalent of about $200,000 today. And she did win the lawsuit, and she did get the money, but it took time. And that's what he's talking about here.
Poor, poor sister. chaste and pure soul, pearl shut inside an outwardly coarse nature. Help her to throw off that appearance of assumed roughness, and anyone might well be dazzled by the divine light concealed under such a bark. Watch over her, brother mine. Forgive her outburstings of passion. She has outbursts. Be patient, merciful, and charity bestowed on another will return to thee 100-fold nobly. Serapis.
And then another letter that same month, he says this is Serapis again.
If you succeed to bring her out before the world in her true light, not of an adept, but of an intellectual writer, and devote yourself both to work together the articles dictated to her, your fortune will be made. Lead her in practical life as she must lead you in spiritual. Your boys, brother mine, will be provided for. Fear not for them. Devote yourself to your main object.
And remember, he was divorced and was very concerned about the fact that he was just about ready to devote himself to the spread of theosophy, meaning he would have to give up his law practice, which was very lucrative. He was making approximately the equivalent of $15,000 a month by practicing law. So he was trying to figure out how could he switch over to a very different enterprise and still provide for his two, I believe, teenage boys at the time.
Do we know Alcott's lineage? He had two boys. This is Alcott we're talking about.
Right. No, we've talked about that before. He just had the two boys. He actually had two other children, but they both died early in life. And these both became businessmen and had an otherwise unremarkable career.
Do we know that they had children?
Oh, I'm sure they did, but apparently nobody followed Alcott in his love of theosophy.
Interesting. Wow. But they're probably out there somewhere, huh?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Huh.
We'll have to check and see how many Alcotts there are in New York State.
Use your intuition, your innate powers. Try, you will succeed. A lot of the masters say that. Just try.
No,
Just
this is exactly it. And they, more than anybody, use that constantly in their communications with Henry Alcott.
compare that with Yoda, because if you like Star Wars, there is no try. Do or do not.
And they are saying, try, do or die. Even if it costs you your life, it's worth it.
They're saying the same thing. It's just semantics. But Yoda is saying, don't try, just do it. And these guys are saying try, but that is the same thing. Do it. Just do.
But the things that they are trying to do are extremely difficult, and the chance of failure is very high.
It's true. Watch over her and let her not come to harm, our dear sister who is so careless and thoughtless for herself. Work hand in hand. Fear not the immoral man who claims her. That's Bettinelli.
Yes.
His hands will be tied. She must be honored and respected and sought by many whom she can instruct. Try to dissipate in her gloom her apprehensions for the future, for they interfere sadly with her spiritual perceptions. Patience, faith, perseverance. Follow my instructions. Let her regain her serenity through you. She will make you acquire knowledge and fame through herself.
Yeah. Without her, Alcott would be completely unknown today except as a footnote in historical books.
Upon returning from the office, know the brotherhood will be assembled in her room, and 7 pairs of ears will listen to your reports and judge the progress your Atma does in relation to intuitional perceptions. Wow.
When he came home, he said, just be aware that you will have 7 pairs of eyes, because he was supposed to write a report every single day about his progress as a potential chela.
Know that you are talking in the presence of your brethren. When needed, they will answer you through her.
So they could communicate through her, but just be aware there are 7 other people in the room.
Wow. I wonder who they are. K.H., Moria, Serapis Bay, DK.
Yeah, obviously, that's quite a contingent of
Wow,
Mahatmas.
yeah, that's pretty important. God's blessing upon thee, brother mine, Serapis.
He uses God, the name God, quite often. Whether that means Ishwara, I don't know, but it wasn't the Christian god.
How come we don't hear more of these letters from Serapis? These are also Mahatma letters.
Yes, they are, but they're so completely different in style.
Yeah.
And it was only during this period. It wasn't too long after this that the Tibetan masters took a greater part in the training of Alcott and working with HPB.
It seemed like Serapis had the idea, well, no, not first, because didn't Moria appear to her when she was a kid?
Not a kid, when she was 21.
In London?
Well, she did actually perceive him
Through dreams.
in dreams.
Right.
Yes, you're right. But she saw him physically in 1851.
So it sounds like they were all aware of them, but Serapis, okay, so maybe he wasn't the first, but he was communicating with Alcott.
Remember when she went on years of training around the world twice? Twice she went around the world.
They were involved in that for sure. They must have been.
And even on her way back, she spent weeks in Cairo and was trained by some of these Mahatmas. They knew her very, very well.
So she probably was with Serapis. Serapis and his crew in Egypt, they're called the Brotherhood of Luxor, right?
Often, yeah, that's how they're referred to. So exciting stuff. We're going to pick up there in our next session.
We're still in the middle of this, so yeah, we'll just dive right in next time.
Yes, but now we're going to talk in the next session about her transformation. There is something that changed drastically. It is very, very interesting. So stay tuned. It gets more and more exciting every time.
Yeah, it does.
All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for continuing your support.